I'm gonna show you how just 5 minutes of optimization can make your particle sim caches up to 10 times smaller. So this is the scene I have. I have a camera going through, I have a subject, and I have some walls which are supposed to represent buildings or props or something like that. And I have a simple particle sim, which is like rain. See it through camera. So that's the sim we're working with. So the first optimization is camera frustum culling, which a lot of you have probably heard of or thought of, and it's pretty simple to do. I have two ways of doing it. One way is a lot more lightweight, and the other way is heavier, but it's a lot easier to set up. To be fair, both are easy to set up. So the first way is we create a box, and the box needs to be aligned in a certain way to the world. So let me set the size to 111, and the center of X will be 0.5, so it's sitting on X from 0 to 1. On Z, it needs to go -1 because the camera faces -1. And on Y, it's going to sit on the floor, on the ground. This box then goes into an attribute VOP, and it's really simple. It's just a from NDC node. Position goes into NDC, position goes out into position. And this gives us a very basic camera frustum volume. Now, if you want to edit that, the first thing I do is I set the size to 1.1 on the X and 1.1 on the Y. This gives me some padding, so the frustum is not exactly aligned, but it's a bit bigger than the actual camera frustum. And then I create two transform nodes on the far clipping plane for the transform. I just manually selected the prim that was on the Z negative side, and then I scale that. So that gives me an area for max clipping. And doing the same with the primitive on this side, on the Z positive side, I can set my clipping minimum. And that's it. You make a group set to points in bounding object, and then delete non-selected, and you get rid of everything. You get rid of everything outside the camera. So we go down from 178,000 particles to 74,000 particles, which is amazing. The other quicker, or not even quicker, the other way to do it is just create a volume. Set it to density, initial value to 1. Input your camera, set your near and far clipping. I extend the window again by 10%. And you can set your resolution to wherever you want. And then in an attribute wrangle, just run an attribute wrangle over the points, volume sample the camera frustum volume, and anything that has a value of less than or equal to 0 will be removed, meaning everything outside of the volume will be removed. Now, personally, I think this way is a lot more friendly to build tools or just to be more versatile across different scales, whereas volume resolution can cause you problems if a scene scale is too big or too small, and it can be slower, so I would probably use the NDC method. The next thing I like to do is occlusion culling, which is why I added in these buildings. So the camera is never going to look behind these buildings, and hence there's no need for us to have these particles in here. So how do we do this? I object merge the camera in first, and the transform needs to be set to into this object. That's my camera. This camera will be used to get a direction, a ray vector from the camera to each particle. So I read in the cam position. I read the camera position in, and then I just make a direction vector subtracting position from camera position, point position from camera position. And this gives me a direction vector traveling between the camera and the particles. And this will be used to intersect with the collision or occlusion geometry. So object merge your occlusion objects, make a ray node. In the ray node, direction source needs to be set to attribute, and you need to input your vector direction here. Turn off transform points because we don't want to move anything, and just turn on ray hit group here at the bottom, and then delete the ray hit group. And now all of the particles that are occluded by the collider are gone. And by doing this, we've gone from 74,000 particles to 36,000 particles. The next thing I like to do is just delete attributes that I don't need. Now, in most cases with particle sims, I'm only keeping position, velocity, age, life, and ID. So I just select these in an attribute delete and delete non-selected, so just keep these. If there's anything else you need, then feel free to keep it. Group delete, if you don't need any of the groups, just delete them, because I do have some groups coming in. I have the occlusion group keep, and I have a particle group, which is 36,000 entries. Just delete those. The next thing is to cast attributes. So if you look at age and life, they are 32-bit float attributes, and by just converting them to 16-bit float, you're making the value half. There is some rounding that happens, so the values don't remain exactly the same. Same with velocity, but I don't think it's going to be noticeable. So if you look at my geometry spreadsheet, you can see the values changing because values are being rounded, values that are very far off in the decimal. But I don't think it matters. I don't think anyone's ever going to notice a difference here. So this is a good way to save some space. With ID is also 32-bit integer, but you have to be careful with casting ID to 16-bit, because at 16-bit you can only have 65,000 and something particles, unique numbers. So if you have particles more than that, you're going to have issues. For example, I have 178,000 particles points in this sim, and if I cast the ID to 16-bit, it's going to go into negative, which is definitely not something we want because we have more than 65,000 particles here. But if I had less than 65,000, I could cast the ID to 16-bit integer. And lastly, before caching out the particles, I create a convert VDB points node. It's set to pack points into VDB points by default, that's good. The only thing I change is the position compression from 16-bit to 8-bit. And that's all of the compression things that I do, all of the optimization. So I'm going to show you a difference now between the previous version, the default base version, and the optimized version. So let me just save this. The base sim on any given frame will have about 178,000 points, and The file size is 6 megabytes per frame, 6000 KB. Okay, this might not look like much, but when you're dealing with a lot of sims with millions of particles, this adds up. Now, with all of my optimizations, let's see what we get to. $473 KB. On a side note, I am working on a video explaining motion blur in Solaris and Karma, so if you're interested in that, then subscribe to me, so when I drop the video, it'll show up for you, you'll be notified, all of that.